Hello, welcome to your third grade tours of the Public Works facility in the city of Batavia. My name is Brian and this is Mike. We work in the street department division of Public Works. Mike and I have special jobs in the street department. We run the sign shop, which means every sign that you guys see throughout the whole city is made and installed by us. It's made here and we go out and install it out in the city. And today what we're going to do for you is we're going to show you a bunch of signs. We're going to go through how a sign is made from start to finish, and we're going to show you the installation of a sign. So to get started, let's take a look at some of these signs back here. And as you can see, they come in every different shape, size, color, imaginable. And everybody knows what this sign means, right? It's a stop sign. Do you guys know what shape this is? You're in third grade now, you should know what shape this is. It's an octagon, right? Anywhere in the world that you go, you see a red octagon, even if you can't read what the letters say, you know it means to stop. So all over the world, if you see a red octagon with white letters, it means the same thing everywhere, right? So that's pretty cool. Now another little neat thing that you guys can tell, do you see the difference in these color signs? You can see this sign a lot brighter than you can see this sign now, right? 10 years ago, we went through and we changed every sign from this color to this color. And the importance of that is that these signs are only put in school sections of the town. So it makes the drivers more aware and alert that there's a higher probability that pedestrians are going to be around, so that they know to be a little bit more safer. Now this is a tough one. Does anybody know what shape this is? It's a pentagon, right? So it's got 5 sides and it's bright yellow. You can see that really well. Now what we're going to do is we're going to have a short demonstration on how we put a sign on a post and we put a post in the ground. I'm going to hand the mic over to Mike and he's going to explain what I'm doing.
Okay, first Brian's going to take the anchor and he's going to put that into the ground. We have a little insert so that we can hit it with the sledgehammer. And once that's secure enough in the ground that it won't fall over, he's now going to put the signpost into the anchor.
I can't actually do that. So we're going to put the sign on with these special types of rivets that you can't really vandalize or destroy. So once that's on there, then it gets put into here, and obviously it's a lot taller in the streets, right? But that's basically the gist of it. So that's how a sign is put on the post and into the ground. All right. So now moving on, I know you kids like to run around the city and have a bunch of fun, but whenever you come across cones or barricades, you guys understand what it means, right? It's a work zone. Stay out, stay away. Usually the roads are closed or they don't want you monkeying around in that area. So whenever you see cones or barricades, please stay away. You guys know when you're coming to your intersection and walking to school that there are crosswalks and stop bars at all the intersections, right? This machine paints every single intersection every single year, right? So we go through the whole city and paint all of the intersections every year. Now what I forgot to mention was a big thing with us in installing these signs is all of those signs are reflective, which means you can see them better at night when the light shines on them. They reflect. we also do the same thing with the paint. This puts either white or yellow paint on the ground wherever it needs it. And what happens is we mix the paint with these tiny, tiny little material. And I know nobody's ever guessed this in 11 years that we've done this, but this is tiny, tiny shards of glass that gets mixed in with the paint so that it reflects inside the paint so that the headlights reflect off of it. So that's pretty cool. Mike and I, every single year, paint every intersection in town. Hello, everybody, again. This is where the magic happens. This is the sign shop. Every single sign that you guys see in this city was made in this room, and then it was brought out and put up by either Mike or me, okay? Now, there are two different ways we make signs in the city. Like I told you before, reflectivity is a huge thing for us. All right, so we set out outside there that all of these signs come in different sizes, shapes, and colors, right? All of this material, all these are just big, gigantic stickers on these rolls. So when you see a sign with a white background, that comes off this roll. When you see one with the yellow, it comes off this roll. When you see one in the school zone, it comes off this roll. But these are just gigantic rolls of stickers. Basically, they're special stickers that will only stick on aluminum, and Mike's going to explain later why they'll only stick to the aluminum, because they will not come off. But basically that's everything. Like you see all the different colors that we use, the orange, the red, there's the green back here, white for stuff. This stuff is all made for all the banners, everything for city council. We want that reflectivity. So the first way you can make signs is by using this. And this is just a gigantic printer, just like what you would have at your house, like your printer for your computer at your home. It's just a lot bigger and a lot more detailed. It can do a lot of stuff. We do stuff for the high school with this. We do stuff for city council with this. But most of the city signs that you see, the stop signs, the no parking, any of that stuff is made with this machine. And this machine is really, really cool because it has a tiny, tiny knife right in here that you're gonna see cuts through this layer of material, but it doesn't go through the bottom. Okay, and that's important because we need to detail and make. So what I'm going to show you is that it's going to cut this green layer, but not this white layer. And Mike will explain to you why that's important so that we can weed these things out and make the signs look as good as we can. Okay, now all of these signs that we make are pre-stored in our computer, and this is just some of them. This isn't all of them. But this is a lot of what's pre-stored in our computer. And today we're gonna make a no parking here to corner sign, okay? So we would look on our sheet here and tell the computer what sign we wanna make. So we would look at the number, which would be R7-2. Then I would come to the computer, and to save time, I already have it brought up, but I would tell the computer what sign I'm making, and then the computer would send the information over to that cutter, and it's going to start cutting. Now the beauty of this is, and you kids will understand this computer never makes a mistake. The penmanship is always perfect, the spelling is perfect, the border is always perfect, everything comes out perfect. So I'm going to cut this off of this machine and hand you over to Mike, and he can start the process from start to finish.
Now, once we have the material, we have all this excess, so we'll just trim off to our size. so it's a little easier to maintain when we're on the table. But Brian mentioned earlier, and this is very important, the reflectivity of the signs. And that is created by this backing that we have to first put on the metal before we put that sign on. Now this metal is, or this backing is held together by tiny, tiny, tiny wires. And once it's on the sign, you can't pull it off. It would take forever. You have to pull each and every little hexagon out. And that's what causes the reflectivity. I don't know if you could tell that on the camera, but that's what you will see at night. And that's what makes the sign good. And when it loses, and it does lose its reflectivity, then we have to replace the sign. So first we would take the backing material, we'd cut it to size to put it on here, and we'd trim it up. So it looks like this, our blank backing. Next, we would take the sign that we cut out on the cutter, and we would start doing a process called weeding. All right, I'm going to show you a little bit of the weeding and how we get from this to this. Kind of satisfying, actually.
See, that blade cuts through just the red and not the white backing.
And that's how we start the process of weeding. After that, we take this sign and we put it onto a special tape called transfer tape, and that would be over here. We have one already made up for us. We have a roller to make sure the sign is even. Roll it through.
Almost 100 pounds.
There's 100 pounds of pressure on the sign. And once we have this sign weeded out and put on this tape, and that's what we're left with.
All right, welcome back, everybody. One of our projects over the last year was to put new logos on every single city vehicle. About a year and a half ago, City Council voted and decided to change our logo from what the old one used to be to what this is. So now this is on every single truck. We have over 70 trucks here at Public Works, and there's about 10 to 15 downtown with community development. As you can see, this is a pre-weeded out logo. So what we would do is we would take these pre-weeded out and put it up and eventually install it on here. This is the exact same size as that one. So every logo that's on all of these trucks was made in the sign shop.
All right, so what I'm going to show you here is one of our plow trucks for the city of Batavia. Along with the sign shop and plowing, we do a lot of other things in the city of Batavia for the street department. So basically, if you look at the sidewalk and you look to the other sidewalk, we try to maintain everything in between there. And this truck is not only used for plowing, but it's for hauling materials and for excavations and such. Now, what we want to explain today, though, is when we are plowing, how to be safe, how to stay back, because these things are very dangerous. This truck, alone without the plow, weighs 12,000 pounds. When we add the plow, and you'll see on the other side it has a wing plow, so it's an extra half a lane, and it's loaded with salt, it's 20,000 pounds. Now the average car weighs only 4,000 to 5,000. So it is a very dangerous machine, especially when we're dealing with slick roads. So we'll take a look around. You'll notice that these tires are much larger than your parents' vehicles. They help us drive in pretty rough conditions. When we move back here, you'll see that we call these dualies, and these are equipped with special brakes. These special air brakes. You have to have a certain license to even drive these trucks. They do behave a little differently than your cars at home. Now we'll come to the back. And this is set up as if we are going to be plowing for snow. You'll notice this is the most important thing for all your parents. Remind your parents to stay back 100 feet when we're moving. We try to put as much reflective stuff up. Brian and I, this is part of the sign shop duties, is to make sure all these trucks are adequately marked for road usage. But right here, you know, this tailgate would come out when it's full of salt, and the salt drops here, and it'll spin here. And that's what gets the coverage on the road. And now this truck is special. This truck is only driven by a couple people in the department, and it's actually a wing plow. This is to give us coverage greater than the plow we have on the front of the truck, and we get like an extra half a lane. So when both plows are down, that snow is going to get pushed real far. It's another reason why we want you to stay away when we're plowing. I know some of you like to throw snowballs at us when we're going, but that front plow can actually throw snow from the center of the road, depending on what kind of snow it is, to past the sidewalk. So we don't want to hit anybody when we're working with the truck or with the snow, because either one's not good news. So if you want to follow me around, we can take a look at the wing plow here. These are all controlled. The plows are all controlled by levers on the inside of the truck. And this one actually has a light that shines on it. And then that lower mirror up on the passenger side is how we'd be able to see it in the night. This truck has to go a little slower than others just because it's harder to see, which makes it, you know, a little bit more dangerous to drive, which, you know, that's why we mark these trucks up, and that's why they have the lights.
Hi, my name's Dan. I'm with the City of Batavia Water and Sewer Department. I'm one of 8 people in our department, and we always have somebody working 24/7, 365 days a year, even on Christmas, holidays. There's somebody always on call. And what I'm here to talk about is a little bit about the water department and how we treat our water, make it safe for drinking, and where we get it from. So on our model here, City of Batavia gets their water from wells. So we have 3 deep wells and 3 shallow wells, ranging from a couple hundred feet deep to about 1,000 feet underground. So on our model here, this represents our well, because all you see is just the top part of it. And then once we pull the water out of the ground, we need to know how much water we're taking out of the ground. So we have a meter. So this represents that on our model here. And then once we go through the meter, we actually take the egg smell out of the water on wells. We take that, we put it through an aerator, and then we have a fan that blows that smell outside. And then on our model here, we have gravel that represents our sand or media filters that takes iron and manganese out of the water. And then after we filter it, we add a couple chemicals to the water to make it safe for drinking for you guys. So we actually add a little bit of chlorine. Same thing in swimming pools, but not as much, just a little bit in there to kill any bacteria in the water and make it safe. We also add fluoride, just a little bit of fluoride, helps with the teeth. And then we add phosphate. And what phosphate does is, everybody's heard about lead and how bad lead is. So we have a piece of lead here, and then on the inside there's a little brown coating in there, and that's the phosphate. It sticks to the lead, and it acts as a protective barrier so the lead does not come out and make you sick when you drink the water. And then after we treat it, we have what we call reservoirs. There's one up here on Wilson Street by the train tracks. That's our well 4. That's a storage tank. So we have water for storage to help fight fires, and for enough water for everybody in the town to drink. And then after we have it in our reservoirs, we need to have pumps to pump the water out into the systems. And that our drill, it represents our pumps. And then so just as we know how much water we're taking out of the ground, we need to know how much water we're sending out into the system. And so we have another meter here. And then with that, everybody knows what these are. They're water towers. We have 3 of them here in town. We have a picture of this one here, and this one's over off of Kirk Road, kind of by Aurora, by Sonic. And that one holds 750,000 gallons of water. And then we have the big one over by the fire station on the west side in the high school, and it has the Bulldog on there, and that one holds 1.5 million gallons of water. So it's a lot of water. And we use it primarily for storage and for pressure. So when you turn your faucets on at home, when you take showers, turn your faucet on to get a drink of water, that pressure there is there to put the water into your houses. And then on the front of our display here, we have the blue pipe that represents our water mains. And then we have copper in here to represent the water mains that go into people's houses. And then the brown pipe is the sewer. So when you're done taking showers, flushing the toilet, stuff like that, that's where that goes and heads down to wastewater. And then we're just gonna kind of run through this real quick. So when everybody's getting up in the morning, taking showers, brushing teeth and stuff, City of Batavia can use, on an average, in the winter, probably about 1 million to 1.5 million gallons of water a day. Up to, when it gets really hot in the summer, we can go up to about 6 million gallons a day. So that's a lot of water we can use. Okay, so I'm gonna, if we look at the water tower, so when we start using all the water, if you guys can see, the water level is going down in the towers. And then once it gets to a certain level that we have on these computers that tells it, hey, we need to put more water into our water tower. So that's when we turn on our pumps to keep the water into our water tower. If you can see, it's slowly rising back up. But sometimes when we're using the 5 to 6 million gallons a day, it's really hard to keep it going. And sometimes we'll use 2 pumps. But as we're pumping water into the water tower, we're taking water out of our reservoir. So with the water going low in the reservoir, we turn on our wells. So we're pulling water out of the wells. It goes through our meter, goes through our aerator to take that smell out, goes into filters, we add our chemicals, and then it goes into our reservoir. So with the tower going low, sometimes we need more than 1 pump running. So we'll put it up to 2 pumps, and we make sure the tower is really full. So with that, it does not shoot water out of the top of the tower. We have an overflow that goes back down to the ground. And we have an altitude valve on there as well to keep it from potentially crushing or pulling in the metal on the towers and stuff. So then once everybody's done using the water and stuff, the tower stops filling, and then our reservoir gets up to a determined level that we set our levels at. And then the well stops.
Hi, I'm Mike. I'm also with the Water and Sewer Department here in Batavia. Dan was talking with you guys a little bit about our treatment processes, so now I'm going to show you a little bit about what goes on in the distribution system after it leaves the treatment facility. So right here we have an example of a 4-inch main that you would find in the ground throughout town. This right here is a valve, and we can turn these to isolate leaks and other certain avenues that we need to get down to and work on these things. And we actually isolate these from up top at the ground level. We have a big wrench that we stick down into the ground and turn these clockwise, and that will slow the water pressure down and the flow down so that we can safely get in and fix leaks and work on these water mains. Now I'll take you around to this section of the pipe. This is a service line tap off of this main. So this is what would be running into your households throughout the city. It's actually called a corporation stop. This is where it all starts. This is where we make our tap on the main. And it comes out, and it will come up into your parkway, and that is where a B box or a buffalo box is at. That's another valve, an isolation point, so that in case of an emergency, a leak in the house or something, we can actually shut the water off outside. From that point, it comes from that valve, and it'll come into your house. And this is where we have our water meter. This is for a 3/4 inch line coming in. This reads the amount of water that is going through your house every single day. Now I'll take you and show you the main sizes that we have for our water mains out in the distribution. You'll primarily see these. This is a 4-inch, just like we have exampled there. This is a 6-inch, and this is an 8-inch in diameter. This right here is one of our repair clamps. And like I was talking about at the beginning, when we isolate and try and slow the flow down, we'll get down in the ground and we'll put these on a break on the main to stop it from leaking. there's that. Now we'll take you over and show you an example of our fire hydrant. This is what would be in the ground coming off of the water main. Then it runs up, and this is what you see up on top. And this is what the firemen will use to operate and fill their trucks and put out fires potentially. There's 3 colors throughout town on our fire hydrants. We have green, yellow, and red, just like a stoplight. Green means good. It's good to use. It's coming off an 8-inch main or larger. A yellow is cautionary. You're not going to get as good a pressure, but it's still usable. And then red, we don't really recommend the firemen to use that or fill up their trucks with that because it's normally off a 4-inch water main and they're not going to get the kind of volume they would going off of one of our bigger mains.
Hi, my name's Tommy. I'm with the City of Batavia Water Department and Sewer Department. In this portion of it, I'm going to talk about the sanitary and sewer lines. So when you flush the toilet or use the sink or the shower, all the wastewater comes down these sewer lines and then eventually will end up at the wastewater treatment plant. So these are all underground, just like our water mains, and there's big concrete manholes at each intersection that we're able to go into, and this is what we call our sewer camera. And here is, we drop this down in the manhole at an intersection, and from there we can go all the way down an entire block and look up services, and the services are what goes to your house. So we can see if there's roots or any defects in the pipe. So here I'll show you an example of us going through a pipe. And then you'll see here that the camera came out the other side. It has a light on it because down on the ground it's not going to be near as light as it is up here. And then we can turn the camera head and look all around, so that way we can see the defects or the service lines. Then we're able to flip around the camera and be able to come backwards in the same pipe, so that way we can see what's going on. So mainly we use this when a road is getting reconstructed, we go down the pipes to make sure that there's no breaks in it before, so that way we don't have to dig up a freshly repaved road and we can fix it before that. Or if we've had a sewer backup in the main, so that way we can check and see if there's a crack or it's egg-shaped or oval.
My name's Tim Grimm from City of Batavia Engineering Department.
I'm Chris Bong from the City of Batavia Engineering Department.
And today we're going to go over some of the things that the engineering department does for the City of Batavia, one of which we review plans for new developments. And part of that review includes looking at stormwater management and how we handle runoff from new developments. So one of the first things that we'd like to review is the water cycle, which most of you have learned about, hopefully in science class, which this picture kind of shows what happens to water from the ocean. It's evaporated into the air and then condenses into clouds. And then when you have a big rainstorm, the water comes back down on land. And then that water goes into different places. It either goes into a river, into a lake, or much of it actually absorbs into the ground.
And that water, it needs to go somewhere. So it's either going to go into the ground, it's going to evaporate, it's going to become surface runoff. What we're trying to do is have as little surface runoff as possible and have as much as possible get soaked into the ground and then evaporate. Demonstration here of what happens when it rains.
What this is basically a small scale version of a watershed. So what we have here is an example of basically what would look like the Fox River. And we've got some higher areas, and then we've got some lower areas that are near the river, which we call floodplain. And what this kind of shows us is how developments will impact the stormwater runoff and how that will impact the river.
So years ago, when development began, there was a lot of what we call impervious area, which means rooftops, parking lots, any roadways. This is called impervious. It means that the water cannot really soak into it very well. Well, compare that to grass or other areas that have vegetation and the water can soak in, which is what we're looking for. So this is an example of a parking lot. So years ago we would pave a parking lot, and it would really, when it rained, it would run off and go to, for example, through storm sewers and through surface runoff right into the Fox River.
Here we're going to start with a model that actually, this will simulate a rainfall into our watershed, and you're going to see the rain going onto the parking lot, and then you'll see how that runoff goes through the river and how high the river will go into the different areas of the watershed.
This is our Rainmaker. So you can see we're making it rain here on the parking lot. And the water, you can tell it's very quickly running off, and it's coming all the way up here by the school bus and inundating the floodplain areas. And these houses, look at that, they're underwater, and you can see it ran through here very quickly. It got to the river very fast. The river couldn't really handle that much water, and it backs up into the surrounding area.
And you can compare this to downtown Batavia, where some of the areas that are closer to the river, like this area, are more susceptible to some of the runoff. So if we don't handle those, or if we don't manage the runoff, some of those areas closer to the river will get affected.
Next, so obviously that created a lot of flooding, and that wasn't really a good situation. So over the years, engineers came up with the idea of having a detention pond for the water to run off into the pond first, and it gets held by the pond. And it's almost like a bathtub where it holds the water, and there is something called a restrictor in the pond, which is almost just like a drain in your bathtub. And it allows the water to be held, but then it releases it at a slower rate. So what we're gonna do is put the parking lot back on here. Now, normally the detention pond is off to the side, but you can get the idea. It's going to flow off of the parking lot into the pond. So we're going to make it rain again. And you can see that the pond so the water is running onto the parking lot, but it's getting held back and filling up this pond, and it's getting released at a very slower rate. And as you can see here, it came up at it didn't come up as high. The water level is much lower, and it's traveling through much slower. It's still draining. It's actually you can see here, the pond is still holding the water, and it can hold the water for a regular pond for a good day. And we have these around town. We've got detention ponds, for example, at right next to Brayburn Marsh, which is a detention pond, and that kind of collects all the stormwater runoff from Walmart, Portillo's, that area, and it goes into the pond first, and then it releases at a slower rate.
And then you can see that some of the lower areas are still impacted by the runoff, but not nearly as severely as it was without the detention pond. Okay, in addition to detention ponds, one of the things that the city uses as a method to control the runoff is it's a wetland. So basically it's a different way of holding the water back, and it also allows for plantings, native plantings, and it's better for wildlife. So we're going to model that so you can kind of see how that impacts the watershed, similar to what we did with the detention pond. So this would be our native wetland. It's basically like a sponge in that it actually takes the water and it absorbs it and then holds it before it releases it. And it's actually really good for the plants too. So here's your parking lot. Your parking lot during a rainstorm will run off into the wetland, and then the wetland will absorb the water, and then you can see how that impacts the water level in the river. So here is our rainmaking. So as you can see, a lot of that water is held back by the wetland, and you can see the water is still building up a little bit, but again, not as severely as it was without either the detention pond or the wetland. You can see the water's just coming up slightly, and some of the lower areas in the watershed are still flooding, but it's not getting up to the level of it was before. Without the detention pond, I think the water came up almost up to here, which is very similar, which is how a river would behave in this situation. Okay, so here's just an example of, this is the city of Chicago. You can see this is from the south part of Chicago looking north. You can see Soldier Field, there's Willis Tower. And what this kind of shows is over time development and how much impervious area it adds to the land. And what this does is this has a huge impact on stormwater runoff. And the city of Chicago and the surrounding areas has a lot of problems with flooding. And over time, both the city and the surrounding suburbs have had to do very, very large projects in order to mitigate some of the flooding. The city of Chicago, because of this being developed without any detention ponds or without any wetlands, has the world's largest wastewater treatment plant because it has to handle all of this extra runoff. So just if you look at that, you can see just the little amount of green space that is in the city.
All right, how you doing? My name's Kurt. I work with the City of Batavia Electric Department. I am what they call a lineman. They don't call us electricians. It's sort of a tradition in our field. Electricians are people who would work inside your home or a building on outlets, lights, that sort of thing. Linemen traditionally work outside on the power lines you see up in the air and under the ground and stuff like that. So we are responsible as linemen in the electric department to make sure the electricity flows into everybody's homes and businesses, again, utilizing the wires either in the air or in the ground. The city is hooked up much like a house. In your house, you have different circuits for different areas of the house. You have a circuit for your kitchen, a circuit for your bathroom, and so forth. The same thing pretty much applies in the city. We might have a circuit for the Millview neighborhood, and a circuit for Fox Trail, and a circuit for downtown, and so forth and so on. It's not unlike a house, just on a much larger scale. Also, with some other differences I'll get to a little later on. I'll be teaching you some terms, but first thing I want to touch on is safety. One of the biggest, most important things in our line of work, and many lines of work, but especially in our line of work, is safety. Not only safety for those of us who work on it, but safety for people who use it. Now, electricity does many wonderful things, and there's no reason for us to be afraid of it, but we have to treat it with respect and be careful around it so as to not get hurt. So I want to start off by showing you some signs you might see. If you're out in the city, here's some of our electrical installations. You'll see signs on fences, buildings, and boxes and such that look like this. A lot of danger, warning, notice, caution, words like that. Again, they're not meant to scare people, they're just meant to get their attention, make them aware to be careful around here and, don't do anything that would cause you harm. So, danger, high voltage, we'll get to that word a little later, and other things like that. One I want to concentrate on right now, though, is this call before you dig, 811, and this name Julie. Now that Julie does not refer to a single person. When we call Julie, we're not calling a person, we're calling an organization. Now, why would you want to call Julie? What is that all about?
Well, like I said, many wires and things are buried in the ground now. And when people need to dig holes, like say they're going to build a house or plant a tree or put up a fence, they need to dig. We have to make sure that they don't dig into our electric wires or other things in the ground. And that Julie organization, the letters in the names stand for Joint Utility Locating Information for Excavators. Excavator is just a fancy word that means people who dig. What happens when we or someone else calls that number, people come out with special machines to find what's under the ground, and then you'll see these sticking out of the ground after they leave. Little colored flags, and you also see paint lines on the ground. And that is telling the people who are going to dig what's under there. Each color represents a different sort of thing in the ground. A blue flag means there's a water line under the ground there. An orange flag means cable TV or telephone or the internet. Green flag means a sewer, like a drain pipe. Yellow flag means gas line, natural gas. The red flag means electricity. Now, one important thing to remember about these flags, obviously the people doing the digging have to pay attention to them, but anybody needs to leave them alone, not pull them out of the ground or play with them, because it's very important they stay there. It's a safety thing, and I'll show you quite dramatically a little later on what could happen if those flags aren't there and those people don't know what's under the ground. There's a lot of different materials, tools, and things we use to work on the electricity around town. A lot of it's safety related, but we have other tools. But I'm going to throw some terms. You've heard the word voltage. I showed you that sign that said danger high voltage. You might hear a term amps or amperage. In simplest terms, voltage is the pressure of the electricity. The number of volts represents how hard the electricity is pushing through the wire. Kind of like a garden hose. When you squeeze the garden hose, you increase the pressure of the water. That would be voltage. Amps or amperage is a word we use to describe the quantity of electricity. Like you would say gallons of water, we would say amps of electricity. The combination of the pressure and the quantity is what does the work. It lights the light bulbs, turns the motors, powers your computers, that sort of thing. So how do we control all this? We control it through a couple of materials. First material I want to talk to you about is called a conductor. Okay, a conductor is not a man on a train. Well, it is, but that's not what we're talking about. A conductor is a material that allows the easy flow of electricity. And most conductors are metals, different kinds of metal. Two very common kinds of metal we use as conductors in our wire are copper and aluminum. The best conductors there are silver and gold, but obviously that would cost a lot of money. But we use a lot of aluminum and a lot of copper to conduct the electricity through the wire to get it into homes and businesses. Now, the higher that voltage is, the harder it is to contain that electrical pressure. Just like a water hose, if it was very high pressure, it might burst. So you would need a thicker, heavier hose to contain a water pressure. We need bigger wire to contain voltage. But then the other thing is, the strange thing about voltage is, or electricity in general, it's always trying to get into the ground. It's something maybe you'll learn about a little later on in school and everything, but electricity, when we create electricity with a generator or something, it always wants to get into the ground. And we don't want it to get into the ground. We want it to go into the homes and the businesses and do all its work. So the next material I want to talk to you about is called an insulator or insulation. The way we contain the electricity so it doesn't get out of control and hurt people is insulation. Or an insulator. Insulation, a lot of insulation examples would be plastic and rubber and things of that sort, and special man-made materials, even glass and porcelain. I have here a pretty good example of what goes on up in the air on our utility poles. You have the aluminum conductor that carries the electricity, and you have a glass or porcelain insulator that keeps it up off the wood pole so that the electricity doesn't go into the ground before we use it. Now, what you might be thinking is, well, why do you need an insulator on a wood pole? Wood doesn't conduct electricity. As a matter of fact, wood does. I'll give you a little fact here. Any material can conduct electricity if the voltage is high enough. Remember what I said about a conductor is a material that allows the easy flow of electricity. Well, everything can conduct electricity if you turn that voltage up high enough. And at some of the voltages we use around town, up on our poles, some of the numbers are 12,000 volts, 34,000 volts. That could easily go right through the wood as if it were a conductor. And that's why we use these insulators. Actually, air can conduct electricity, and everybody here has seen it. It's called lightning. That's simply electricity of such a high voltage that it jumps from the clouds to the ground, or vice versa. So obviously, if electricity can jump through the air, it can go through most anything if that pressure is high enough. But we have tools and things and materials to keep it in control. In your houses, your wires are covered with insulation that surrounds the metal. That keeps that electricity in the wire, so it doesn't get out of control and hurt people. And once again, the higher that voltage, the more insulation you need. Okay, now I want to talk to you about a piece of equipment that we use a lot in the electric world called a transformer. Now, if I asked you what a transformer was, you might think of a popular movie series with robots and such, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about a piece of equipment that takes the electrical voltage and changes it. Why do we need to do that? Well, in your homes, the distance between rooms and from upstairs to downstairs isn't that great. But out here in town, we may have to push that electricity all the way to the other side of the town. And out in the country, our bigger utilities are pushing electricity all the way across the country and states. In order to do that, you need to turn that pressure up. On the other hand, you need to turn it back down before it gets into the house or it'd burn your house down. We use what's called a transformer to do that. It's a very simple piece of equipment. I have here an example of a transformer that would be mounted on a pole, just kind of like this model over here. And these big glass insulators on the side here is where the high voltage would go in. These smaller insulators here and this wire here is where the lower voltage would come out so that it was safe to go into your house. Now there's a very simple machine. All there is in here is a magnet surrounded by a bunch of wire and some insulation, and the oil that gets put inside the transformer is an insulator. Keeps everything under control. Over here, if we were to put a transformer for underground wire, it would look like this. It's a big green box. I'm sure you've seen them around town. It does the same thing as that one over there. It's just shaped different and everything because it sits on the ground. It has to be a little heavier duty. It has to have more protection around it so people can't get in there and touch it. You know, obviously the lid would be closed. But it does the same thing. High voltage goes in, low voltage comes out. I want to show you an actual working example of a transformer right here. You can see what we're talking about. I'm going to take this voltmeter, which measures voltage. I'm going to measure how much voltage is coming out of this electrical outlet, much like you see in your house. And I don't know if the camera's going to get this. I'm going to put that in there. It says 120 volts. Let's see if I can turn a little light on. Oh, I don't have a light. 120 volts. That's the standard voltage you would get in a regular electric outlet in a home. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug in this transformer. This is a 4-to-1 transformer. That's some real simple mathematics. You take whatever voltage goes into it, multiply it by 4, and that's what comes out. So if you want to be thinking about what would 120 times 4 be, you can take a guess at that, and I'll show you. You can see right here, I have 400, I don't know if you can see that, 480 volts. That's a lot of voltage. Okay, if I wasn't careful and touched that, that would hurt a lot. And I'd have to be real careful about that. But this one little transformer can do that. Imagine the power that can flow through one of these or that green box. By the way, a standard transformer like this or that green box, we would use that to power about anywhere from 6 to 10 houses, depending on how big the houses were. So they can do a lot of work. Okay, now we're talking about all this voltage and how dangerous all this stuff can be and everything. Let's talk a little bit about the tools and materials we use to work on it. Now, I talk about insulators. Insulators hold the wire up off the poles. Insulators surround wire when we bury it in the ground or run it through the walls of our homes. Insulators can also come in helpful with tools. Now, when we work on the electricity in town, we can't always turn it off. One of the first things electricians and homeowners do if they're going to work on something electrical is they turn it off, obviously. Well, we don't always have that luxury. Sometimes we have to work on something, maintain it, while the power's still going because we don't want to shut people's power off. So we have special tools and other things we can use to do that. First thing I'm going to show you is some protective gloves. These are specially made and tested, insulated gloves for working on live electric. I could reach, these are rated to 20,000 volts. So I could this high voltage wire that would be coming in here, I could tighten this, loosen this, I could touch that and be safe because I have these special gloves on. Now, they look like just regular rubber. They are not. It's a very special material. Don't think you can just take a piece of rubber and touch something that's electric. This is a very specialized, very expensive, I might add, piece of material here so that I can work on electricity while it's still on and I don't have to turn people's power off to do simple tasks. Okay, so that's the gloves we use. The very clothes I'm wearing, this blue shirt, these blue pants, they're not insulated, but they are what we call flame resistant. So if there was a spark or something, they won't start on fire. I have a special hard hat I wear. Again, this hard hat is insulated. If I touch a wire, bump into a wire with this hard hat, it will insulate me from the electricity. But when it comes down to the tools, we also use insulation. This is a special tool. We call it a grip awl because I can use the controls here. See that little hook there, and I can grab onto things. I can grab onto a wire. I can work things inside the transformer. It's almost like a little robot arm, kind of. And again, this is all special insulation, specially constructed to keep me safe from being electrocuted. And they come in different shapes and sizes. This is the same thing, insulated stick, but it's specially designed to operate switches. This is a switch inside this transformer. And I can operate it without being close to the transformer because I have this stick. And they come really large. If you see over here in the corner, I have this very long telescoping extendable stick. This is only halfway out. It'll actually be twice as tall. Unfortunately, I have a roof in my way. If we were outside, I could go up another 15 or so feet. That means I can stand down here and touch all this high voltage stuff and work all this stuff up here while being safely insulated from the electricity. Not only that, but the physical distance. If something were to go wrong and there were to be an explosion or something up there, I would be safe because I'm a long ways away. Once again, you do not have access to these sort of materials, so you would never want to mess with electricity. And along with all the special material comes special training. It takes us 4 years of schooling to become a lineman, and then even after that, you're still learning. You know, it's like any other job, you can still learn and still become better and such. I've personally been doing it for about 20 years and I still learn things. So, all right, so that gives you some of the tools and stuff we use. Now, as I said, a lot of our wires are under the ground, the ones in the air, we have to work on them. See my little model here of a bucket truck. I don't know if you've ever seen these. Out working, you know, the guy goes up in the bucket, the real deal's behind over there. But you notice this is on our little road here. We can't always get to where we need to be with this one of these trucks. If it's back in the woods or in somebody's yard, we can't just drive this truck up there and work on it. So how are we going to get up there and do it? Well, I'll show you. We're going to climb. We have to actually climb the wood pole, climb up there and work on it. And I'm going to show you some of the special things we use to do that. First thing you have to have is what we call climbing gaffs, G-A-F-F-S, or climbing hooks. I don't know if any of you watching TV have ever seen like the lumberjack competitions where the guys climb up. It's sort of like that, only we don't move nearly that fast. We go slow and safe, but it's the same deal. So I would put these on my legs, strap them in. Mine are very old. The modern ones are, they're all Velcro and they're more comfortable, but I'm an old guy. All right, buckle them up nice and tight. You can imagine all the training that goes into knowing how to use this stuff. The climbing part of the job is some of the hardest training there is. Okay, now I've got my hooks on. Obviously, I'm going to go up there to do work. So I'm going to have a tool belt. You all have seen tool belts, right? Maybe you've seen other workers, your parents, whatever, put on a tool belt to do a little work around the house or something. This is kind of like that, but again, it's very special because it's just for us. So I'm going to put my tool belt on like that. All right, now I can throw some tools in there. I got a tool bag here. A lot of the stuff you see any workman use, wrenches, stuff like that. And I would wear my hard hat. It's way over there, so I'll just pretend I have a hard hat on. There's one key component missing though. When I get up there, so I'm climbing the pole, when I get up there, I need to work, I need to use my hands. If I let go of the pole though, I'll fall. So how can I do that? Safety strap. You get up, wrap this safety strap around the pole, and that holds you to the pole. So now I can lean back, and I can let go of the pole, do my work. You can even climb with this strap. In fact, a lot of us do that now, just as an added measure of safety. You know, instead of just relying on our hands, we use the strap. That way, if something happens, we don't fall. The pole just catches us. You might get a few splinters, but that's better than falling. So that's how we would do our job up there with all this gear on. When this electricity goes into your home, something I'm sure your parents realize is it's not free. Somebody has to pay for it. Aspect of it. I want to show you a little something about the cost of electricity and some of the things we do. Not only to save money on the cost of electricity, but also help the environment. I have here a little mock-up of what would be in your house. This is called an electric meter. It's on the side of every house and building that has an electric service. Its function is to tell us how much electricity is being used so someone can pay the right amount of money for it. Okay? This is actually a very older model. They're all digital now. They can be read with radios and everything, but it's the same principle, same thing. So I'm sure you've heard your parents say, turn that light off, turn that off, you're not using it, because they're concerned about spending money. But in addition to all that, you've heard people talk about being green and saving the environment and stuff like that. I'm going to give you a little example of what we can do, for instance, with just light bulbs to help save electricity and help the environment. I have 3 different kinds of light bulbs here. This top one is an old-fashioned light bulb. It's called incandescent. All it's got is a little wire inside. When you turn it on, the electricity flows through it. That wire gets hot and it makes light. It does a good job, but it uses a lot of electricity. It's very inefficient. Then they came up with compact fluorescent light bulbs. It uses a different principle. It's kind of complicated. It uses less electricity than this light bulb, but it's still not quite, all the way there. This is an LED. That stands for light emitting diode light bulb. This will throw off a lot of light and use hardly any electricity at all. Let me give you an example of that. So first thing I'm going to turn all three of them on, and two things I want you to notice. This meter here is going to tell us how many amperes or amps we're going to use. Remember, that's quantity. It's like gallons, right? But we're also going to watch this meter. There's a little disc in there, and that disc is going to move. The faster it moves, the more electricity you're using. So first I'm going to turn on all three lights. And you notice we're up to about 5 amps on the meter. And this disc is moving. Not very fast, but it is moving. Now let's just turn on the old-fashioned light bulb. If you look real close at the meter, it says about 3.5 amps. And the disc is moving. Again, it's moving slowly, but if you look real close, you can see it. Now we're going to turn on the compact fluorescent light bulb. That's barely 1 amp. You have to look really close to see that the needle is just barely off to 0. And you have to look really, really close to see the disc moving in the meter. You might not even be able to notice it. You get the point. You're using a lot less of electricity. Now let's turn on the LED. The needle's not even to the first mark. In fact, I'm going to turn it off and on again. You'll see how the needle hardly moves at all. It's barely noticeable. And you can't even see the disc in the meter moving. So imagine that. Okay, we're going to go back to the old-fashioned light bulb. Old-fashioned light bulb. Now imagine throughout town, you're talking about in the town of Batavia with 25,000 people and all its businesses, you probably have 200,000-300,000 light bulbs burning. Imagine you multiply that by that, see how much less electricity gets used when people use these LEDs. So people can save money, like your parents, but it's also better for the environment. That means less resources getting used to make that electricity. All right? So now we're going to get to Power Town. Now we're going to get into, I'm going to show you very dramatically something I hope no one ever sees in real life. But it'll show you the power of electricity and what can happen. Now you notice I'm putting on my insulated gloves. You're probably wondering why. Because when I turn this model town on, we call it Power Town, these wires will actually be carrying in real life 10,000 volts of electricity. There's a little transformer in this model home, and it's going to take my 120 volts coming out of the wall and make it in 10,000 volts. So I put on my gloves, I got my safety glasses on, I'm ready to go. Okay. Now, we were talking about, remember talking about Julie and the flags, and the people are going to dig holes, and don't play with the flags, don't take them out of the ground. So let me show you what could happen if someone was digging a hole and they didn't know electrical wires were in there because someone pulled the flag out of the ground. This guy'd be digging the hole and, uh-oh, that's real life electricity there flowing from the wire into the tractor because it's sitting on the ground. So that electricity flows through the wire, through the tractor, into the ground. Now if someone was standing by or in this tractor, or if someone was working in the hole, that'd be very dangerous. They would get hurt very seriously. So you see, once again, that's why don't mess with those flags. You don't want to see that happen. I don't know if you can hear that too. It's a sound we don't like to hear. Okay. Talked to you earlier about the signs, warnings, danger, high voltage, stay out. You see on the front of my little model transformer here, my little danger sign, right? Well, if that door were open, which it never should be, not in this town anyway, and someone were to come by and reach in there and touch something, uh-oh. See that? Once again, bad news. Serious injury or worse. Because that electricity is now flowing from this wire or transformer through the person into the ground. Once again, that's why the signs are on there. Now you should never see one of these with the door open. If you did, if you saw one of these green boxes with the door open and wires hanging out of it, that's a legitimate 911 call. You want to let us know right away so we can go out there and fix that. That might happen if a car were to bump into it, the door might fly open or something like that. Okay, here's another example of our signs. This is a model of what we call a substation. It's just a big area where we have lots of switches and transformers and things like that. The signs are on the fence for a reason. You wouldn't want to go in there and touch something, especially in one of our fenced-in areas. We don't always have the wires insulated and everything because the only people who are supposed to be in there is us. So you would not want to go in there and touch something. Same thing. There's that electricity going to the ground through the person again. Now, normally you would not be able to access one of these areas, but if a gate was left open, and again, we're not just talking about Batavia, this is anywhere you go. No matter where you go in our country, you're going to see things like this. And you never want to go in there. Another thing is, if someone were flying a kite, or any kind of scenario where someone has something tall, it could be like a ladder by a house, by the wires, or something like that, something that's tall. You want to be careful, because if you're around overhead power lines and you get that kite string or that ladder or whatever, uh-oh. See that? And you can see on the bottom, see the bottom where the feet are? You can see it down there too. Okay, now string that would be tied to a kite, again, wouldn't normally be a good conductor, but because the voltage is so high, it is. Now this obviously, this blue area is supposed to represent water. Water is an excellent conductor. That's why you never put anything electrical close to the bathtub or shower or sink. That's why. If you were in a sailboat and there were overhead lines, sailboats in the water, again, sailboat might be made out of wood or fiberglass, but again, at those high voltages, it's going to conduct electricity because that water is even better at attracting electricity than the ground is. This actually happened in the Fox River many years ago. This actually happened up in St. Charles, and it hurt some people really bad. Now, another thing I want to show you here, we often have power lines come down for one reason or the other. Windstorm, car hits a pole, whatever. And a power line might come down on a metal vehicle, okay? This is a really, 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 really dangerous situation, okay? Now, if you're in the car, you might not get hurt, Okay, this is a very, very unpredictable situation. But if you're in the car, you might not get hurt because you're not touching the ground. Again, that's only as long as the tires are good, because the rubber can be an insulator, depending on the voltage. Where this gets really, really dangerous is if that wire comes down on the car and someone comes up and touches it. Uh-oh. Again, they made a path to ground from the wire through the car, through the person, into the ground. That's why if I were in a car and a wire were to fall on it and nothing was happening, I would not try to get out. I would stay there. If the car was on fire, that's a bad situation. I guess you could try to jump, but again, you get the point. You don't want to be that bridge between the energized conductor and the ground. Last thing I want to show you is, I turned this off, that's why I can do this. Okay, I got a switch on the floor back here. Last thing I want to show you on this is probably the most common thing that creates a problem with the overhead electric lines, and that is a tree. Every year we spend thousands of dollars trying to trim trees, which people don't always like, but it's necessary. We spend thousands of dollars repairing the damage done by trees. Trees cause power outages all the time, not just Batavia, but I'm sure you hear the news about a hurricane down south and the people are without power for months because of the trees hitting the wires. Trees, especially if it's raining and they're really wet, can be excellent conductors of electricity. So the trees, the wind comes, blows the trees into the power line, and that happens. Now that, not only can it cause a power outage, not only can it start the tree on fire, not only can it knock the tree over onto someone's house or car or something, but you see the little model of the guy down here. next to the tree. I'm sure they still teach in school that you never run under a tree during a lightning storm, right? Well, that's why, because the lightning is going to do the same thing this power line's doing. It's going to put electricity in that tree, and if you're standing at the base of that tree, it's going to go through you. So again, you'd be aware of what's up above. And again, hopefully, we really do spend a lot of time and money every year trying to trim the trees. We simply can't get to all of them. It's just, and nobody can. All throughout the largest power outage in the history of our country occurred in Ohio and spread all the way to the eastern coast because of a tree. It all started with, that's a fact, it all started with a tree, one tree. Now, obviously there were malfunctions and some things after that, but yeah, it all started because a tree blew into a power line. So, well, that hopefully shows you a little bit visually about the danger and the power of electricity. Again, you don't need to be running scared from it, just treat it with respect. Some very common sense things: pay attention to the signs, pay attention up above when there's overhead power lines, and hopefully you learn something about how we control this stuff and how we get it to do work for us so that you can enjoy light and computers and TV and all that fun stuff, okay?